Okay, hi. I'm Robert, the game director, and joining us today is Krieg as well. Want to say hi, Krieg?
Hi.
um, essentially, we're going to be going over the last 2 weeks of progress. I'll have Krieg talk a little bit about what he's going to be doing, ideally the next week or two as well, just to kind of bring on a little bit more tidbit of content to the game as we're just kind of getting through this next month. So we didn't have a podcast last week. We undoubtedly have a lot of shit to cover, and I'm going to try and keep everything condensed within an hour and rapid fire it because there's a lot to go over. So, I think first things first is we're going to basically just kind of start out on the level design. And from there, we'll go to animation, the character modeling, the programming, all the new gameplay changes, all the fun balance stuff. So, right off the rip, I'm going to share my screen and we're gonna load into the Alcatraz map. And I'm just gonna show some of the brief stuff that Dimitri's been doing and some of the stuff that Michael's done really quickly, since it's conveniently in the same area. So you figure right off the rip, Dimitri has been kind of just going through and just kind of doing his detail pass, adjusting the width of the areas, putting in the new windows, putting in this side walkway, and adjusting the proportions of the island to make it fall more in alignment with what it looks like in real life. You'll also notice that I'm playing as the assault right now when it comes to the operators. One of the other things that he did before pieced out for his weekend was he went ahead and set it up so that operators could use. Let me just go to the operator customization. Is that we go over here? He set up a new generic section, and he basically made it to where you could essentially feed in any of the normal classes and use them as your cosmetic for the hero creator. I know right now the favorite is the scientist, and the sniper is personally my favorite. But then you figure you can just kind of run around as one of those characters. That's already out as of the patch that came out a day or two ago, give or take the change. So you figure that was one of the things that Michael did to close out the week, was getting that in. And that's something that obviously you can use in RTS, and TPS is your hero unit. So technically, you got another 6 to 8 new characters to choose from. And as we add new characters to the ground rotation of CERC, then we'll add them there. Maybe we'll add the pilot just for shits and giggles for people that like to role play. That was one of the biggest things that Michael wanted to put it in there for, which is giving people some more tools to play with for like role playing and just setting their roles with their operators. But people like Hawkins, where they have like 30 operators and they use them interchangeably as in RTS, it kind of gives you a little more like visual polish, I guess you can say, to kind of see like who's what and who's doing what and everything else. So again, the island's slowly but surely kind of coming together as he works on just kind of structuring and getting the interior set up. He's been kind of getting pulled in every direction to help out us on the helicopters and the VFX and other technical things, because Dimitri is kind of a savant when it comes to just anything technical across the entire engine in terms of VFX, the helicopter physics, just anything generally that requires like a technical artist at Dimitri's purview. So we've been stealing him every once in a while. So he hasn't been able to get as much time as he'd like in Alcatraz, because essentially we've been just kind of trying to finesse and get the helicopters where we're happy with them. The next thing I want to pull up is I'm going to pull up the open world master. Now, this is the other map that got some improvement and renovations over the last 60 days or so. After, basically we introduced pandemic about a month and a half ago. And at this point, we've been working to speedily bring back in Treasure Island and get that to a point where it's playable. And then that way, you can slowly but surely add on Angel, Alcatraz, and San Francisco North. Now, in the build that we released about a day or so ago, it has Treasure Island fully playable. We've been doing, secret testing on Discord every couple of hours, or every couple of days, rather, in some cases, to hunt down bugs and issues with the issues that stem from bringing in a new map. Because as you guys know, it increases their unpredictability of, it worked fine in that map, doesn't work in that one. So it allows us to stress test the system and figure out where some code is just not, I guess you could say, flexible enough or reusable enough or intuitive enough to recreate. And I mean, when it came down to it, a lot of the work that went into Treasure was just porting over the assets from the Legacy SDK and then just double checking the collision and the navigation and everything else, because everything else that we had prototyped in Half Moon Bay was a seamless transition, where it was like to actually set up the unique characteristics of the new build or new rebuild, except the zones, the populations of the structures, and all the other stuff was pretty quick. So that's the other thing, is that I have to patch this out on in the next couple of days. Is that sometimes when you start on this map, you'll sometimes start in Alcatraz. I am gonna work on that. I'm gonna try and fix that either tonight or on Monday, worst case. But you can see this is the map as it stands for our vision for the Bay Area map. Again, this area here with the cards are playable. Chelsea does spawn. We've been playing sessions on this map throughout the entire week, and we released it for you guys to play. There were some changes and improvements that we made at some of the level geo. Like, for instance, the De Young Museum was removed from this area because that exists in San Francisco North. And essentially, we just repurposed it to a small little, like, residential district, little, like, area, and then a parking complex here. So that was the one area that we did make a change to, rather, to just make it a little more fleshed out and lively. You can see that efforts are kind of working on just essentially, let me just mute the combat music. There's a bug where sometimes Chelsea triggers the combat music when she sacrifices one of her drones to build a pod. I have to fix that going into Monday. It's bloody annoying. But essentially, you can see that slowly but surely this island's coming together. Like I mentioned in the previous podcast, only the top area is accessible. We added these little jersey dividers to just block out the unplayable region down there to Oakland. And then we did the same thing for these lower areas. And then this doesn't build navigation. So if you somehow bug a unit out on here, you're not going to be able to move. So don't try it. But the biggest thing is that this lane is going to be your direct conduit. When we get the, let me just not, we got to work on the camera a little bit there. But this lane is going to be the direct conduit to San Francisco North. So I'm going to kind of go through the game plan and what we're working through right now, so you guys can kind of get an idea of our choices and why we made them. So essentially, one of the biggest things that I wanted to do with Unreal Engine 5 was with double float precision, which allows us to go larger on worlds and not have to worry about inaccuracies and move mouse clicks and a bunch of other bullshit that plagued us for years in Unreal Engine 4. We were finally able to build the Bay Area how we originally envisioned for an RTS game. So this area, Treasure Island, eventually will become the tutorial Baby Turtle Island, and the main bread and butter will be this island. So right now that we've gotten everything ported over to the SDK, Efren has gotten this map over here playable, and I'm working through bugs and other navigation IDs that pop up, and we're triaging them as they come up. Then the next area that will become playable in the coming weeks will be Angel up here. We'll add in the systems for the infected to be able to traverse the world and be able to island hop like they do in Legacy via the Leviathan or via other methods to make it to where if we turn off the Leviathan, the game is not easy mode. Alcatraz will come online at the same time and become a small little player base that you can build in a small little areas here and there. Mostly it's just there for set dressing. There will be no sock here. And there are limited areas to build, as you can see. But it's mostly just here because it exists in real life, so I wanted to try and keep it accurate. If it becomes a problem and the gameplay is impossible, we'll have to revisit some things, but we're going to try it out and experiment it with having this RTS version of the map that you can go to and build. There might be some more entities that are cleaned out and removed, like this area here, and these areas here. And like this area here might be cleared out just to give players a little more areas to like build in. Because as it stands, the navigation, the AI have to be able to go up these staircase, run up this ramp. The ramp is the easy part. It's the staircase that I'm worried about. So we're going to be just kind of taking that one step at a time as we go, as we introduce the island hopping to the infected, and we'll address it accordingly as we kind of tackle those things. The next thing is basically just as we're basically working on, the level design for both of these islands are done. Dimitri's just working on the main jailhouse and some textures here and there to make this island look more photorealistic and use more newer Megascan textures. Angel Island is conceptually done. There's nothing here that needs to be done. Everything's workable, everything's playable. It's just more so the infected don't know how to island hop. So we have to get that base functionality in, and then we'll unlock this island for you guys to, play it like in Legacy. Because the biggest thing is I don't want to unlock that as well until we get the LCAC for you and the LHA6 moving again. So that'll be part of the vehicle pass that we do in the next 30 days, which we'll get into that in a bit. Anyway, so let me just briefly go over here. You can see this area is in disrepair, and this is what's really going to take up a majority of our time going into December and January. It's just kind of slowly but surely doing this grid by grid and using a procedural building generator that Epic uses for the Matrix demo. To basically, we feed it a bunch of parts, and it dynamically generates structures like a procedure. It's like a building generator. So we can feed it like deco or environments that you would see in some of these areas, and then it would generate 100, 200, 300 variants. And the more stuff we give it, the more it can spit out. So we don't have to design every single unique one. We can just say we need 60 variants, and they say we want that one. That one's shit. I like that one. Let's use that one to generate Victorian homes and all the other stuff that's over here. So we'll be doing stuff like that to populate this area and to speed it up. And that way we texture like 100 assets. We have like potentially 500 that basically like variations of homes that we can just use to litter this area. And the only things that you can't get away from is like this and this and that and that. The literally unique silhouettes, the weenies is what you call them in game design, that make that area, distinct, like the wharf area. Anyhow, going off on a tangent. So we're going to move on from here. You can see that Chelsea has already infected the military base. She took Rift's favorite fucking place to build. Sucks to suck. And then you can figure we also worked quite a bit on the fog of war and the performance with that. So I see a bug right now, is that this is Chelsea's main pod, but it's not hiding the children. That was another issue that's plagued the build for the last couple of months, is that when you would lose a structure, or they would lose a structure, you would sometimes keep fog of war, especially in multiplayer. That was something else. Like last week was fucking bug week. And there's still a couple more bugs that we need to fix going into the next 2 or 3 days, and some minor performance issues that we're hunting down and triaging. But as it stands, like we were just focused fully on just hunting down bugs. Some minor quality of life fixes and changes came in, but it was like you don't know where the gas tower is. You kind of know where it is, where it's like right here, but like you actually have to go out and scout. The pods aren't going to be visible by default anymore. The gas towers, the defense pods. You have to build scout drones. You have to actually lose people. You actually have to have you have to have some skin in the game to know where the infection is in your zone. So that's in there. That's fixed. Groovy. And that's another big change that came this week, technically last week, with just the added bug fixes and tweaks we've been doing with the fog of war and the line of sight system. So the next thing I'm going to do is show the next map that Efren's bringing in next week. So in Legacy, we have another one that was meant to be a demo for the game, but it ended up being a full map, and its name was Calypso. And Calypso is a fictional island off the coast of San Francisco that we came up with to basically just give people a little more content to play. Now, Efren's been kind of going through is before we bite off doing San Francisco North, and he's on that for months, we're like, well, why don't we just port over Calypso, because it'll take a week or so. He started it yesterday, technically, and he's porting it over and getting it playable. And that ideally around Wednesday, Tuesday, we'll have some kind of beta again. And then by Friday, worst case, we'll have it out to you guys as another playable map. So once it loads, I'll show y'all. I'll go over the quirks and what's going on with that. And then we're going to separate all the programming stuff that's been going on. So just bear with me. Well, there it goes. Okay. So Calypso was our other map that basically was playable in Legacy. And it featured multiple airfields with very sequestered one-way corridors. So those turtlers are like their wet dream. I know Ford's salivating at the mouth right now if he's awake from playing Space Engineers. But you figure the idea was that way it allowed direct control and easy ways of funneling the infected and being able to eventually set up civilian evacuation areas like the baseball field or the beaches. I think the beaches. Or you could do it at the airfields. Because you figure the stadium. Yeah. So the idea is that you figure this is the other map that'll be coming in around Wednesday. So technically y'all will have 3 maps to play in Pandemic by the end of next week. And then that way we'll triage it and just kind of see what other bugs might pop up. But for the most part, it'll give you guys enough content to hold you over while we're working on the vehicles, while we're working on the save system, the custom game options, and all the other fun stuff that we're going to get into in a second. So this is the second baby, and right now he's just kind of going through and making sure all the assets came over correctly, making sure the collision's right. I'll show you guys. setting up the helicopter navigation that's new in this project. Like those fences are purple because the juggernaut and explosives can destroy them. So like that kind of stuff. He's just making sure all that stuff came over. So when we scale up and we add in the vehicles, AI, or rather the vehicles and the juggernaut know they can just Kool-Aid man through these fences if they so deem so. And the same thing is like those fences when we made chaos destructible, like we did in Legacy. So we're setting the table for basically being able to rapidly just kind of roll everything out now that we've kind of laid the framework and the groundwork over the last 10 months and change, 11 months and change. I'm just kind of prototyping and getting everything situated. So you can kind of see an idea of just the scale that's coming with this map. And I think between those three, it'll be a nice, healthy dose of content. Just make people happy. And then just give them a little bit more to play with. Now, one thing that we're also going to be looking into is that Krieg has so generously, dedicated to basically doing some of his free time. He's a modder. So he was going to see about making some horde scenarios to basically, and just to clarify on this, because sometimes we get shit for this for some reason, is that there are people that only do level design on our team. So they have to continue doing level design, even if we're behind on programming. So there's still going to be new maps and new content coming out all the time. We don't just randomly fire people. I don't know why people advocated for that when we got shit 3 months ago for we were working on maps while we were working on the rebuild. There's just no indie team, no development team works like that in the planet Earth, where you only have people that already do one, that do everything. So, Krieg, do you want to talk about what you're going to be doing over the next month or two?
Yeah, and so the intent is I'm going to be a little bit rusty getting up to speed with all of this, but I intend to make some like simplified horde mode maps, and over time as they're actually functional and able for people to play, they'll be fleshed out a bit more. But in the meantime, whilst the other level designers are working on getting Calypso up to date, which that'll probably be this week,
on Wednesday,
right? Correct. Yeah. And then obviously the next big push is vehicles and San Fran, the larger section of the map. So they can devote their time onto that whilst I go through many energy drinks and just get a few, or maybe at least one horde map out. Ideally, I'd like to get a few out, small variants that people can play in, because it's surprising actually to see how many people are using multiplayer right now, because it's quite a high number. Whether it be RTS or operator, clearly there's groups of friends that are playing together, and we do have a looking for group section in the Discord now as well. If no one has anyone to play with,
I was translating some Russians off of the Steam forums, and they were asking each other to play with each other, and I was like, this morning, and I was like, that's fucking cool. Because I was like, I had no idea what they were saying.
Yeah,
and I saw their thread,
that
and I was like, that's really cool. I like that. Like I don't understand Russian. I put it in the chat GPT to translate it. And it was just one of those things where I was like, okay, cool. We're starting to get like more people from different backgrounds to play the game or whatever,
Yeah, there's
we need a
entire
Chinese
groups.
and a Russian
There
mod.
was like
FYI,
6 people that were
me
playing
and
the
Krieger
other
were
day.
talking about this, but we do need to get like a Chinese or Russian mod. So, is anyone that's listening, that's from that hemisphere and wants to contact me or Krieg on Discord, please do, because we want to just make sure that we have enough people from every language that understand what people are saying and the nuances. So, if you're interested, send us a DM. But anyway, back to you, Krieg.
Yeah, so like obviously we got the HMB, I forget was it Half Moon Bay? Half Moon Bay map. So that started out as originally as like a little horde map that we were testing on, and then it turned into the platform, because obviously everything has to be modular right now because things are slowly coming back in, bugs need to be squashed, stability needs to be issued in, the team will be working on all of that. So that was the place for the SOCs and evac side of it. Obviously civilian evac isn't in yet, but maps like that, they're small, out of the way, not necessarily connected to a San Francisco element, but within its sphere outside of that.
Well, let's
we can
let's break it down into chunks so they understand what we're getting at here. So the biggest thing for me is the value proposition of the game. So like from Krieg's standpoint, he approached me and he was sharing what other teams are doing for like having simple scenarios, horde missions and whatnot. and we need to get rid of the RTS co-op test map and make something that's simplistic, that's basically just a quick little throwaway mission that's small, where you're just defending a fixed position in the middle of San Francisco. So he's going to kind of be going through and essentially just throwing together a couple of quick little scenarios, 2 or 3 horde maps, whatever, and whatever pace he can kind of muster. He's coming from a modding standpoint to basically say, give you a quick scenario, is he might take like an area like over here and turn his own custom version of it and have it to where there's a strategic resource in the center of the town. There's 6 lanes. Defend it. And you know, basically they're going to start spawning from different lanes as the waves go on, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of something that he's going to be working on to replace the RTS co-op test map, but at the same time interject a little bit more life into that demographic of gameplay, so then that way it doesn't feel like the horde's just kind of being left by the wayside, and it gets a little bit more there to kind of play with. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add there, Creek, or move on?
I know that's fine. Think of what was that one Command and Conquer?
Yes.
Generals, where they had their scenario missions, or World in Conflict even.
So that's basically that in a nutshell for one other initiative that we're working on going into the end of the year to basically get that situated. Now, the next thing I want to cover is the programming. So let me, actually, you know what? Let me just show this really quickly. So if I go to the infected, and I go to you and you, and you, open up those. So this is some of the infected that Michael's been working on, basically prototyping some different designs. Oh, they opened on my second monitor. And essentially just getting them in. They're in the current build, in the rebuild now. And he's working on other variations. Ignore the guns. It's just for the skeleton. It's basically a CERC thing where he keeps the weapons on them, and then basically it makes it to where they appear on the character for prototyping, like where guns attach points are. But more so, that's some of the infected meshes that we're putting in right now to basically just kind of flesh out the game and just kind of add more variation and update the models from what we did originally in Legacy. So just some ideas that he's working with and just kind of slowly but surely adding in different types of infected. And then the lurker was one of the ones that he was brainstorming to basically have ones that come out at night, similar to Days Gone. And they would travel in packs and be a little bit faster and have a little more health. So then that way going out at night was a little bit more deadly. And that is something that we do want to reinstitute into the game, is having it to where at nighttime you're disinclined. You don't want to really go out because there's more of a chance of being like running into more deadly infected, different strains, that kind of stuff. So those are things, the directions or vectors that we're moving into. We just kind of add a little more range the gameplay and like, okay, I don't want to go out because just nighttime just hit. Let's just hide in our base. If we go out, we'll send out a helicopter patrol. We'll send out a vehicle, but we're not going to go on foot because, like, you know, those guys might find us, call in reinforcements, and basically overwhelm us. So those are one of the other things that we're looking at doing to basically just kind of iron out the gameplay and just kind of more like levels to it per se. So that in a nutshell is what Michael's been working on, is prototyping the infected. And then we also worked on, let me open up the top-down example. And then let me spawn in. Yeah, you'll do. One of the other things that we set out to do, and I'm going to be carrying this over to RTS, we prototyped it around Tuesday, Wednesday of last week, was setting it up so that basically the operators had a better giving system that we could carry over to RTS, and it was very efficient for performance. So you'll notice that I can blow off her leg, and then she'll bleed out. She'll still keep trying to melee me until she dies. But one of the other things with the new giving system is I can blow off one leg and then blow off his arm, and he'll still try and basically run at me. And then eventually he'll bleed out. You can blow off both legs and both arms, and they'll bite you. Let's see if I can do that without killing him. Actually, I'll do the arms first. Hey, I'm not going to have such luck. They're going to bleed out before you even do it. But the idea is we went for like a Ghost of Tsushima type thing for the giving and dismemberment. So we can do clean cuts on the skinning and the rigging, and then be able to spawn limbs like in World at War. So that's something else that we're looking into. We did the prototype and operator on Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I'm going to be carrying that over So basically, RTS gains it around Monday. Now that the test succeeded, because the RTS collision is cheaper for performance, and then operators have a different level of fidelity associated with them when they're aiming. So that way they can get more precise shots. Otherwise, the game would explode trying to do full simulation for every character at all times. So we have to do some kind of like, I guess you say mathematics to basically associate this part of the capsule hit would mean that it would be a clean shot for the arm, or that might be a chest, or that might be a head. So those are things that we're just kind of like finessing and kind of like tweaking. So that way you get like that Warhammer 3 or like that. You get like some kind of goring and dismemberment and blood in the scene, so that way it seems more lively. So it's something that I'm going to be working on going into Monday, but there's a little bit of teaser right there. Okay, let me pull up my next note. One of the other things that we set out to do, and I mentioned this briefly when we first started, was we were having a lot of issues with the fog of war and crashes when people would like dying rapidly. Like when we had like co-op primarily, but we had like multiple sessions running, but we would have like 2 or 3 different battles going concurrently. The fog of war and the RTS system would kind of like have a heart attack from how quickly people were killing people. And then sometimes it would like try and reference the point of the memory for like updating a fog of war, but that person died a long time ago. Because like, we're threading the calls, and long time ago is like seconds and over nanoseconds. So it's one of those things where we basically went through, and that's why we paused the podcast last Saturday, is that we were in the middle of retrofitting and improving the fog of war, fixing the visibility issues that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, and at the same time rewriting aspects of the fog of war so it's a little bit more friendly to the frequency that units are killed and created in our game. So that was a huge change that came in around Monday, Tuesday. We've been stress testing it and just kind of trying to hunt down any new issues or problems that present themselves as we go. So far, it's been incredibly stable and no issues that we ran into. But we're keeping a watchful eye on that going into Monday to see if any of the issues rear their head, which is why I was putting those pings out in the playtester channel of like, once that build is out, the one from 2 days ago, I need y'all to break it. Like, I need to like see what kind of crashes and stability issues still occur so we can fix them and then we can move on. Because like you figure our bug list is the lowest it's ever been. There's probably about maybe like 4 or 5 bugs right now that are like I want to completely rectify before we move back to the save system and we work on the custom game options. So that way the game is as bugless as it can be. We worked on a lot of client-side desyncs and a lot of like small little performance issues and weird oddities with like clients joining in late game that we needed to hunt down and eradicate. A lot of testing, a lot of cooking of builds and torturing people on the public Discord. Thank you for that. And essentially, we're getting to a point in the next 3 to 4 days where we're going to be content with the state of the game and we can finally move on to doing the rest of the other small changes here and there. What I do want to do is I want to highlight a couple of the other changes that we've done, and then we're going to move on. So let me pull up my sheet here. Hold on. Let's see. That would be starting on... I think I covered that. Hold on. Let me check my calendar. 1 second. That would be, so I'm trying to make sure I don't miss anything. Anything from the 24th and that. Okay, so then that would be... Right. Okay, I'm just going to download the videos for sake of time so I don't have to demonstrate and show every aspect. But essentially, last week I went through and I was working on the save system. And I was basically just setting it up so that characters could essentially, remember their location, remember their health, remember their infection level, remember what the structures were destroyed and which structures were still created. So these are different tests that I was doing last week to basically just kind of iron out and get the save system to a point of completion. Basically going, because in a video game, you have to go through and you have to serialize and save every aspect, every facet of the game and figure out what you want to save and what you don't want to do. And with the rebuild, we used the built-in save system of like uProperty tags which made it a lot more efficient than how we did in the legacy and a lot easier to basically serialize and like save data. So like the fire modes, for example, is an example here. Just going through and setting up the fire mode saving. Setting up the flashlights. So then that saves, and we just mute the audio. So when I save the game and I load it, they have their flashlights on, or rather I turned it on, and then I save it. Setting up that kind of stuff. I'll download this one. This is all stuff that I'm aiming to kind of get back to around Wednesday after we hunt down the last remaining bugs and critical issues with the game. Because ideally, the ideal plan is that you figure around Tuesday, Wednesday, we'd finally get on the custom game options after eradicating and hunting down the worst bugs, the worst offenders, rather. And then at that point, I'll help out on that. And then me and Derek were going to split. I was going to go work on the save system some more, and he was going to start porting over the Ajax vehicles. So you can see like right here, the gas infection level in the thing, and then here the day and night system. Setting that up so it saves and loads. Give it a second to update. XP, I'll download that one. It basically is a sequential process. It's just kind of going through. So in this instance, I just spawned a bunch of infected, let them kill people. And then I checked their data before. And then I just saved the game. Load it, and then verify it all came over for their XP. And then later on, I do kill. Let me see. I think that one had kills. Let me check. No, that one didn't have kills because I hadn't done that one yet. So eventually, just kind of going through. There's money saving, putting that in there. So I'm slowly but surely just kind of going through a checklist of every aspect of gameplay. The biggest things that remain for the save system on my whiteboard as it stands right now custom when you change the inventory of a weapon, the ammo, last formation order, last formation type, and then at that point it's going through and just making sure that and then saving the AI states in the pandemic mode. So that's something so those are technically the 4 things. And the pandemic one I don't think is gonna be nearly that bad. It's a bunch of just the GUIDs and basically just what were you doing, what was your previous task, how far along was the infection. Because a lot of it is plug and play for how I programmed pandemic this time around. So just by saving the structures, saving that they were built, saving the infected, saving their GUIDs, GUIDs being the tasks that they were assigned to, they'll just reassign themselves to the task when they reload and re-query the system and do whatever needs to be done or restart combat in those cases. So technically it won't be that fast. Sorry, not fast. That's slow to get it back to the point of playable. And here you see is the patrol, setting out the patrol, save and load, and just making sure it works, making sure they all function and whatnot, and then making sure that when you save and load and an infected shows up, they actually stop and then go back to their patrol. Setting up the gas. Once I load that. So that way that saves and loads. There's a weird issue with the vehicles. It's going to only be the helicopters, I would imagine. But when you save and load, they kind of go back down because they act like they need to land. So it's something I'll probably have to communicate with Derek through to figure out why the AI think they need to land, do an emergency landing when you load a save game even though they have gas, they were in the air previously. It's just probably a quirk of the trace. Because what helicopters do by default when we load in, they try and find the floor to plant themselves to it. So that way they're not clipping, and they automatically start with their engine off and that kind of stuff like on the carrier. So it's just a quirk of not having a save system in that we have to add an if else that basically says if we're currently loading a save file and you're being spawned in, is there payload data available for you? Oh, there is? We should use that. Oh, there isn't? Do your normal logic. Because we're going to assume that there's an instantiating situation where that makes sense. Why we're doing that. So the other thing we snuck in is something that Michael's been on my ass for weeks, is adding in different ranges for different units. So there's an air range and there's a ground range now. And that the spine throwers use the air range for air targets, and they use the ground range for ground targets. And that makes it a lot more sustainable and easier, so you're not getting sniped from a spine turret that's that is using the range of the helicopters to stay combat viable, essentially, but it's unyieldly when it comes to ground infantry. As you can see at that range, it's 6,000 UU right there. Essentially, that is the range of generally every unit in the game. The only thing that technically outranges that is the sniper. So it's one of those things where essentially that was a big change that came in. Michael's still working to go to the backlog and address the Apache and the spine throwers and just make sure it's everything has an equal opportunity to hit each other. Because I loved it for like the visual impact of like when you're flying the helicopters over the city and you're not paying attention, the spine throwers are just like throwing up rounds in the air. That's like a beautiful like look there that I would say in terms of like just generally how it all kind of comes together. Then the other thing, let's see here. Was there anything else that I breezed over for the save? Oh, right. There's the other one. I'll just put this in there too. It's save and load system for landscaping. So then that way the navigation knows the load, and if I save the game and I reload it, it's not there. The navigation knows the update. Now I'm going to be frank. There is an issue in Legacy. This is one of the reasons why we also started the rebuild. Because some of the ways that we did the navigation and the way that we place objects down was so convoluted and weird that like there's an issue in Legacy where if you save and reload, sometimes the navigation doesn't update. And I tried fixing it, I think a week or two ago, and ended up giving up because I'd have to rip out the entire structure system in Legacy and fix it. Because in the rebuild, we did it correctly, and we did it by the board. So you figure it's one of those things where like that was one of the big things that I'm hitting upon and I'm testing with the save system going into next week is making sure that we don't run into those same issues where like if you save and load a game in Legacy, there's a very good chance that your units are not going to know how to pathfind around those objects and they're going to run right into them. And that's why we get that complaint and the negative reviews and everything else if our units are fucking stupid. No, it's because there's a save and loading bug that I technically can't fix without ripping out entire sections of the game, which I could fix. But then it kind of defeats the purpose of the rebuild because it would be like, it would make even more issues. It's a cascading issue where you fix one thing and then you break something else. And because the sandbags and the barbed wire and a bunch of other things were decentralized, it's not really like intuitive. You have to like implement 3 or 4 different fixes. Where with this system, there's one fix and it cascades to every variation of structure. So that was one of the things that we kind of set out to do this time around. Is to make sure that everything had like a family tree and there was more planning put into basically just kind of how everything coalesces and communicates. So doing one thing does all the work for us. I'll give you guys an example. When we finally do get to the bridges and make it indestructible, the same system that runs this guy is the same system that runs the bridges. The same system that runs your wall rubble mode is the same exact way we're going to do the bridges. The bridges will just have a rubble mode. The same way that we have that functionality programmed into the barracks, the CDC tent. Every structure in the entire game supports being turned into rubble and being repaired. It just, do we choose to implement it? Can we make a rubble asset? Does it make sense in the confines of the gameplay? It's basically giving us the tools and the breathing room to be able to expand the gameplay with very little effort in terms of like, okay, we have the resources now. Let's play around with adding some rubble modes to the CERC tent, the barracks. So that way, if people lose their base, there's a rubble that stays behind and they can go back and repair it for a lower cost, like things that we want to experiment with long term. So you can kind of see like how we're just kind of like slowly but surely getting back to where we were before, but doing it better. And learning from the mistakes of the past in terms of like how can we do these things in a way where it works for us. We're planning for things that we can't do right now, but things we want to do later down the line, like the faction manager or dynamic civilian groups. So it's just one of those things where it just consciously just kind of thinking about those things. So I just wanted to kind of hit upon that point just to kind of explain that a little bit more. So one of the other things, and let me see if I can bring that up. Where has Dalif gone? Oh, I showed that. Oh, right. I'll show this one. So this is one of the big ones is that I know this is a concern for me at least, is that if like, for instance, you save and load and essentially everyone doesn't come back and play with you, where does that money go? So one of the things that I said, we've been working on this quite a bit over the last week, was making sure, let's say little Timmy has to go to work. But you want to continue your game as the host. It's your world. Why should you have to wait for him if you're going to continue building up a fob, doing this, doing that? So one of the things that we were testing was setting it up so that when you load a save game, so I'm going to go back to the hub and simulate a multiplayer game. So let's say everyone just shut down the game, everyone went home, and then you come back early, and you're like, hey, when you get home from work, John, I'm going to set up a base and resume a little bit of work. So I loaded the game, and then you can see in that instance, it reset the shared pool, and it put the 15K that was allocated to the left player and the 15K that was allocated to the right player, and reset it and put it back in the pool to 30K. So then at that point, it's up to the player's discretion to figure out, do I want to do control modes again? Do I want to do shared money or open money, whatever? It resets when you reload the game, and then it's up to the player or the host to figure out and rearrange the table. But the money will always go back to the host in that instance. So then that way the host isn't screwed if his friends don't ever come back to play with them or they're busy with work or whatever. One of the other things that we saw happening was that very likely people would like start deleting your shit to get money to buy stuff for themselves. That no longer is a thing. So if Ricky builds a bunch of stuff over here, and let me just actually bring up the mode. So if I go over here and I change the economy to split, and then you figure, do I have an engineer? Oh, dang it. I deleted them, didn't I? Oopsie. Always do that. Because this is like our scratch pad map. So we go here to basically just really quickly test mechanics. So everyone just kind of tosses stuff in here sometimes. So like it can change like really often. Why am I not getting the widget? That is weird. Oh, you know what? It's probably a visual bug with the resolution. Okay, so we're going to put that there. We're going to put this here. And then we're going to change the control mode. And then we're going to change the ownership mode. So then that way, if I go, I'll do it as the client. Am I pausing the game or what is going on? Hold on. That's weird. Okay, I guess I was pausing the game and not even realizing it. Hold on. So that'd be economy mode split. And then we're going to go over here and we're going to right. Split money. And then we're going to build a thing. And then we're going to wait for it to finish. So we're going to slow-mo 5. Okay, and then that way if I go over here and I delete this, and you figure it went back to that player. The money went over there. And that was the other thing, is that we put in a system, this was so often people were doing this, is that they were deleting stuff for other people's units. So we put in that. And the other thing we did is we made it to where you get like 60% of the money that you put into a structure just to make it to work. Because people would delete their entire base when the infected were coming. It was out of pocket. I'd be sitting in a playtest, and then someone's job in the playtest was legitimately, someone else's job was to evac all the troops. Someone else's job was to defend, and the third guy was just deleting everything in the base. So then that way they could get the money back. And I was like, that was a walking exploit. So that was one of the other things that Lord, I saw you guys doing this. Like literally, you guys would do this every fucking time you guys would lose. Hawkins or someone else would be like, delete, everything gone. The entire base gone. So I was like, okay, we're going to have to add like a % loss or something because that's just wild. And then the other thing that we might look into is having a deconstruct time like in Age of Empires. So everyone just doesn't delete their base in like a nanosecond and pack up and leave, and there's no skin in the game. So that's one of the things that we're basically looking into doing. There is a delay. We're probably going to have to lower that delay because it's a little bit obnoxious in terms of how long that delay is. Because like you figure, it's like, watch, if I destroy these structures, we put this in there as a limiter. Because in the Unreal Engine, destroying and creating objects are some of the most expensive things you'll ever do in a video game, or just in the Unreal Engine in general. Like you'll find it everywhere in the documentation where they say like, avoid caution destroying too many things in one go because you will break the engine. Because it's the garbage collector, basically. So one thing that you'll notice is, let me just turn off the slow-mo, is when I destroy this, like that delay is long. That's how long it took to destroy it. And you can see right there that the money system worked. It went to me. So then if the host deletes this, it goes to me. I built it. So because like people were literally doing that to get VTOLs early game, and nobody was noticing. Like we were doing our playtest, Krieg and other people were noticing that people were deleting shit just to buy units, and they wouldn't tell you. And it was just kind of like, okay, that's why we added in the activity log for trolls, and that was why we added in the delay for destroying structures. Because if you destroyed enough structures in one frame, it would actually cause the Unreal Engine to freeze. That's why I got that freeze a month ago when we were doing a pandemic session for the Battle of Half Moon Bay. Is literally someone deleted Krieg's entire base when we won. Caused the entire game to freeze for 60 seconds. Because it flooded my network with RPC calls. Basically a DDoS attack. So that person was banned from the playtest. But essentially it's one of those things where we went in and we put this in to basically safeguard that. And at the same time, we might have to loosen it up a little bit. Because what it does is it does it in batches of like 10 per every couple of seconds. We're going to do some more benchmarking and see if we can decrease that rate. When you're playing offline, it's instant. Because there's nothing to be sent over the internet. There's no delay. Delete your base, stop, don't worry about it. Offline. When you're playing online is when we institute the delay so you don't blow up everyone's computer, flooding the network with RPC calls, remote procedures. So you figure that's something that we're looking into, and we're conscious that that's kind of long. Because like, watch, that was like a second later that it deleted. And what it does is it adds it to a batch, and then it deletes them in batches, so there's no chance of circumventing or breaking the game anymore. We're gonna tweak that, because it's one of those things where as I play more games with people, we're gonna have to just figure out if we can speed that up a little bit, or what else we can do to mitigate it to not make it as long, or maybe just do timed demolitions that are like a little bit quicker, and then that kind of stuff. So that's something else that went in. And the other thing you're gonna notice is a small little quality of life that Derek's been working on. He worked on it last night, and it's beautiful. Is that if I go to slow-mo 5 to speed up the world, when I click on it, you're gonna notice that he put this nice little builder control section in. I put the prototype in, he went in there and Oprah Winfrey'd it. He's a savant when it comes to UI. I'm a caveman. So one of the other things was he put in the dynamic thing, so as you're holding keys, it will actually appear and show what's going on, just to make it easier of what you're doing. So landscape mode, you know what mode you're in. If, like, for instance, I go in and this is a beautiful part right here. Let's say I want to mass build stuff. This is one of the other things that he did. He made it to where it mirrors the last rotation of a place object. For those city builders out there, they're playing Mozart while they're building the base in the back, Krieg. And essentially making it to where it's easier to build symmetrical bases. Every structure in the game now has a grid, I guess you could say a impromptu or rotation copy. Now it'll remember it up to 10 seconds. So if you leave the builder tool and then you come back in 10 seconds, it will reset it. But let's say you go into the builder tool, you place a couple of generators, and then within 10 seconds you're like, I want to place down that barracks too. It will remember the last orientation and put it in. So that's another cool little thing that we put in the rebuild based off of just talking to people on Discord. We're just sitting in a room just like, what would make the game better? Well, what do you do every day that makes it really mundane? Because I sit here and I watch people play co-op. Typically, when I play a co-op session, I don't actually play. When I do play, I tell people not to stop telling me about bugs. I want to play the game and enjoy it, so just put it in the reports channel. But when I don't play and I'm just watching, I'll watch how people are placing down structures. I'll watch how they communicate to each other. Things that we can improve, things that are just kind of weird. So it's one of those things that we're just kind of, actively just always just looking at seeing what people are saying, and then trying to figure out what we can do now and what we can do later. This is one of those things where the value that it brings to the game is insurmountable in terms of being able to build your bases quickly and efficiently. Like, for instance, the new builder system, where we added in a new system for basically how it previews and puts down locations. So, for example, We snuck it in about a week ago. We didn't really talk about it too much. Is that I converted the entire pathfinding system for the construction system to a more lightweight, efficient, like asynchronous query system to make it to where they're not they're a little bit more like intelligent when it comes to choosing their places to go through. Because I was losing my shit where you would build a wall and they would go around the long way. So me and Derek just kind of spent a day or so just like trying to figure out why sometimes they think it's a better to go all the way around a wall instead of walking 3 feet to their right and building the fucking wall. So hopefully that's gone. We spent a considerable amount of time trying to hunt down that bug last week and the week before that to rectify it. You can see right now it's using the new builder AI that we programmed in. It's going to fail sometimes when you build very narrow, very tiny areas where the navigable paths are tiny. There's nothing I can do about that. Every RTS game in the history of man has that issue, especially because we don't use a grid snap. So if you somehow do this, I'll show you guys, and these strips become too narrow, they probably won't be able to reach that point, and you'll have to destroy some structures. But that's just every RTS game. I mean, you could build your own units into a housing complex in Age of Empires, and they'll get stuck forever until you destroy one. So it's one of those things where, like, we might have to make the tangible decision later down the pipe of converting the game to be more grid-based, so then that way it's impossible, like Age of Empires, to build so close you break the game's navigation. But for right now, we'll leave it to more freeform, and then we'll address it based off of feedback and the bugs and what people say and what people want. Because you figure maybe people are okay with it, and they just want to have that level of density of how close they can tightly knit things together, and they're willing to basically just kind of babysit their units in extreme circumstances where you're building even more narrow than this, and then you have a fence hugging this line. There's no way of mitigating that. You're going to have to baby them. Because you figure, like, if I go and I do this, and I do this, and I build so close that there's no physical proximity to get there, they're going to struggle bus it if there's no space here to reach. So that's just going to be a thing forever. Until we either switch to a grid-based system like Age of Empires, where there's negative space that's pre-allocated around every structure, but then it kind of makes it to where you can't have optimal building placement. So it's a give and take kind of thing. We're the only crazy fucks that I could find on the internet that doesn't have a grid-based building system for an RTS game. So we wanted it for the flexibility of being able to do stuff like this, where you can have like stuff super mecha close. But the con is that now that area right there is impassable, and you couldn't build it unless you're on somewhere around that coin side. And if you block off the left and the right and the front of that spotlight, the only other area to build from would be that little slit here. Like in real life. So I guess it makes sense to a certain degree, whereas things have to be reachable. But it's just something to keep into consideration that we're always conscious of from a design standpoint for the builders in the world. Because we have plenty of those from when we see people playing the game in public Discord. Is like just closing off here and very narrow strip. You might be able to glitch your engineer into building the spotlight to the wall, but he's probably just going to do this and just go all the way around. And then if you close that off, you're just not building that spotlight. That's on you. But you figure they physically can't reach that point. And that was the biggest thing, is getting it to the point of those gotchas, is improving the pathfinding and trying to figure out those issues where it's our fault, or if it's just base design issues, logistic issues, where you're just building your stuff so claustrophobically close, they physically cannot reach that space, and you're going to have to rethink your base. There's going to be those situations. So that's one thing that we worked on. Now, the next thing is that, let me see if I can find that section. Here it is. I'll download the video for sake of convenience and time. So one of the things that I see people playing as the operator pretty frequently, and I talk to a lot of operator players almost every day, and the biggest thing was the visual clutter on the screen was out of this fucking world. And I've been talking about this for weeks, is I wanted to find the time to rectify it, so I fit it in the rebuild of like this week of bug fixes and quality of life. Is no more for zone cards on the map. They're gone. They're dead. You want to see them, you press T. But otherwise, this is how it looks by default when you're moving around. And then you can see the current power and the information in your zone that you're in on the top left, but that's it. You're not going to be like pop-ups everywhere, like microtransactions, like that Ready Player One meme, where it's like nobody wants to see all that shit. Move on with it. So, like if I go over here and I show you, and then this is another quality of life is trolling. So you figure we put in a slider for drone visibility and operator mode, but we're going to be putting one in for the RTS as well. So as you adjust that, drones are no longer going to appear based off of a proximity, so they don't get in your way and they don't get you fucking killed. So it's one of those things of like we're slowly but surely just kind of going through the backlog and just kind of ironing out the quality of life and making it to a point where everyone can kind of enjoy the game in their own way. Whether you're an operator, whether you're an RTS, or you're a hybrid. Because I talk to so many people, and they're like Hawkins doesn't even play fucking operator typically. He just uses them as RTS units. So he'll have like 30 RTS units. He just buys them as we go, as we get more money, and then he'll use them interchangeably instead of buying an engineer or a medic or an assault. He'll just have a hybrid unit. So this is one of the other things that we did just to kind of make it a little bit more fleshed out and easier to just kind of navigate the world, because that was pissing me off to no end. If you guys were ever in a playtest and I was playing the game or when I was streaming the game, it was crazy. The amount of visual clutter, especially when the maps get bigger, like in Treasure Island and Half Moon Bay, it's untenable. So the other thing is we snuck in run mode, and we also updated some of the icons because like Riff and a couple other people kept bringing it up to our attention that it was not obvious when things were on cooldown. That's nice when you're showing a number. What the fuck does that actually mean? So you figure like there was a lot of player confusion of when an ability was on cooldown versus active. So Derek put in some visual indicators to the operator. He put in some visual indicators to the RTS. We're going to put that out tonight and the playtest. We're going to do a public playtest after this. If anyone that wants to partake on YouTube, on Steam Store, and on Discord, anyone's welcome to join. The 16-player limit, so join it while it's hot. And basically, the idea is going to be is we're going to try and break the game and have some fun. But we'll be playing everything we're showing. So I'm going to cook a build. So give me 10 to 15 minutes to cook that build. We'll be playing on Treasure Island, mind you. So we'll be playing on the new map, FYI. And this is the new UI that we've been working on. We're going to see how people feel about that. Is there some confusion? Does it answer the questions of people getting like, is it active? Is it on cooldown? Why does it keep resetting? So we'll see how that is. Because like that was one of the biggest things that I'm always playing with, like, you know, the Patreons and public people on Discord, and they're always telling me like, what the fuck does this mean, Dark? Look at my share screen. And I'm like, huh, you're right. That is kind of weird. So it's just one of those things where like we kind of got that ironed out and fixed. I'm really curious to see how the zone card change works, because you can press T in game now, and then you can just see every zone card in the map as the operator. Or you can just, by default, it's off. And then at that point, your map is clear and you can focus on your job. Because when we play a co-op, we always have dedicated RTS players where their job on the ground our operator players, is their job on the ground is to assist in any way possible the job of the RTS players. So they're running around in fire teams, they're doing base security, they're scouting out the infection, they're doing hit and run missions, they're trying to keep Chelsea away from the RTS players. While the RTS players are trying to hang on for their lives and get their bases and their defenses and all that situated. So I wanted to give them that level of, visibility, or I guess you can say, like, easier to play the game. One of the things that we still have to do, and I have to sneak that in, is the scopes. I haven't forgot about it. Me and Derek have to sneak that in sometime around the same time. I think around the time we joined the Ajax. We might take a couple of hours and put in the scopes, the 2 times, the 4 times, and the 8 times for the snipers, for the operators, so you can actually zoom. Because right now, all the scopes are just stat changes. We're going to do that. It's more so just, I get shit every time I put too much stuff into the operators, even though like it's a really cool aspect of the game. It's a pyramid of gameplay in terms of like the operators with the RTS and then how they all coalesce and the hybridization of the game. That's my vision. That's my goal. That is what the game is going to become. So if you don't like that, I don't know what to tell you. Don't interact with the operators. Play them as RTS heroes. You still get a hero unit that you can fully customize to your whim and play and fill roles or heroes in your game. But it's a thing. It's going to happen. It's going to be in the game for the rest of its lifetime. So I don't know what to tell those people that want to burn me at the stake for putting in the operators. So around the time as doctrines, after the ground vehicles, after we get the airstrikes in, we'll focus another week or two on some last-minute polish for the operators before we move on to civilian evacuation and dynamic civilian groups. So as it stands right now, in my mind, we need to finish up about 2 or 3 days of bugs. I know I said that last week. We were going to try and get to the custom game options, but there was a lot of fucking bugs. There were a lot of crashes, and there were a lot of balance issues that we needed to address. So we don't create the same fucking problem we've done for 5 years, or we just keep adding and adding and adding and adding and adding, and not even maintaining what's already fucking there. So I know I'm going to get shit. I'm not going to win no matter what at the end of the day, because we still have a lot of backlog content to get through, but it is what it is. So we need at least maybe a day if we get lucky. We get some quick breakthroughs. Nothing crazy comes up over the weekend or on Monday and Tuesday that's like the halts the presses. Is that you figure we'll get through that last couple of days of triage and bugs. And then at that point, I'll try and break off as soon as possible, maybe Tuesday, to work on the save system. Try and get that functional by Friday. Probably will need some help with Derek on a couple of issues with the formation system, but that shouldn't be too crazy because that was primarily his baby. But then at that point, when I split off on the save system, he'll be splitting off on the custom game options. And then ideally, if everything comes to fruition, we'll get it out by Friday, Saturday of next week. And then the next thing will be is the Ajax, and we'll use that as the incubator. I know I've been saying this. I just want to reiterate this, is that the Ajax is the gateway to all the other vehicles. It's the simplest and easiest vehicle, and it has weapons, and it's like the Sparrow. But we build that up first. We get the fundamentals and the essentials and the driving and the moving and all the other issues rectified, and then we scale up. Because that happened very quickly. Is once we got the Sparrow in, and it was fully functional and working, within a week, we got the other half of the vehicles in for the Airburn. And then within another week, all the rest of the vehicles, the VTOL and the Apache were the last two. They took the longest, and they were the most complicated. But the Apache set the foundation for the Abrams, and it set the foundation for basically multi-platform weapons, and same thing with the Sparrow. Both of those two set the foundation of everything that comes next for independently targeting turrets for the Abrams, and just having multiple weapons in the case of like other vehicles in the future, like the Bradley. So it's a logical rollout progression in terms of basically just trying to get everything back to rebuild. So legacy. So in my mind, we were trying to aim for Halloween to try and merge the builds, and we were hoping the Ajax would be in at this point. That did not fucking happen. It was just too much to go through. Too many bugs. Too many new content coming in. So our goal is going to be now, going into November, we're resetting the clock, and we're reevaluating it every week. In my mind, I don't want to split once we get the doctrines in, once we get the vehicles in, we're basically flipping the builds. Legacy is now an opt-in, and the base game is now the rebuild. In my mind, that's enough to justify. You'll have 3 maps. You'll have 3 horde maps. 3 pandemic maps, 3 horde maps at that point, ideally. And then it'll just be a logical rollout of just basically whatever polish and bugs need to happen after we do that flip. And then we'll start civilian evacuation. Because I know there's still some people saying that civilian evacuation and dynamic civilian groups will never come back. But again, we're doing it in paces. We're not going to try and bite off more than we can chew. We're not going to try and jump the line because a lot of people are being more vocal. We need to do it in a linear fashion that it makes sense, so we can make sure these systems get the attention to detail and the time that they demand to make sure that they're firing on all cylinders. So I have to kind of push back sometimes when it comes to like people want the Abrams and the fucking Stryker and the Bradley right now. No, we cannot do that right now. We need to take the time to basically build systems out and make sure everything is fully functional. So I think that kind of nails down everything going into October as like a post-mortem of what worked and what didn't. That's why I'm kind of going off on this field to just kind of explain what's going on there. I would say that when it came to October, we accomplished a lot in terms of basically just kind of like the mechanics and the systems, and things are finally coming in here and there. We obviously still have some things to work on. Michael is still working on about 10 or so more standard infected types, like the standard infected, like different variations, like the girl. So he's working through those. He's doing some minor edits and tweaks to them, making sure they're optimized. So that's something that Michael's working on, is that initiative. It's getting the standard infected and the civilians ready for when we get to that point and we start putting them in the city again to populate it. We accomplished quite a bit in the bug hunts and the performance tweaks. There's still some work to be done. Obviously, we missed the Ajax, like I mentioned. We got Treasure Island in. That goal was met. And we'll roll out Angel ideally by the end of this month. We'll just see how that goes based off of the vehicles, because it's going to be an escalation there. That's pretty much all the goals we had for this month. You can see what I'm going over in the last Steam post for the patch notes that I posted yesterday of like the October goals. So you figure we'll work on getting the Ajax in. We'll get the custom. We'll get the save and load in the next week ideally. And then we'll start the Ajax at the end of that week. We'll keep you guys informed in terms of as things change, as things are coming in. Because when we get the Ajax in, we're going to need a metric shitload of people to play test the game. Like, literally break them. Like, literally just load up the game and just play. I'm going to break Cepheus Protocol Simulator. Where it's like literally your goal is just to find any instance that we haven't found or we haven't identified where the pathfinding breaks. Because we don't want to move on to the JLTV and all the other vehicles until that Ajax is immaculate in terms of every facet of movement. So then that way we don't have any of the issues that we had before, and they just work with them. Like, there'll be some minor tweaks in here based off of their weight, their speed, their turning ratio. Sure. But that'll be on a per case basis as those chassis or those models come in. For like the Ajax to the Striker are completely different body weights. So there will be some minor adjustments here and there to make sure the code is fluid enough to be able to support and dynamically adjust and ramp up and down based off of its mass. But those are like mathematical calculations that we'll bake into the Striker or the Ajax, and then we'll adjust and tweak if it's not enough or it's too little, or make it configurable on a per case basis for Dimitri and Co to adjust. Okay, so that pretty much sums up that aspect of what I wanted to go over. Let me go ahead and let me check my notes, and then we're going to segue into the last section. What do we got for time? 1 hour? Okay, we got to start to wrap this up soon, so let me see. I know I'm missing a couple of things, so bear with me. So, let me check there. I showed the penetration system, so there's nothing really to show for that. I think I showed that, but I'm going to recap it just to make sure. Is that you figure the new helipads are also in, if you guys missed that about a week ago. So you figure we put in 2 helipads that just are a lot more, I guess you could say they're more fluid if it's how we want the gameplay to operate, or it's more flat and it kind of doesn't affect the navigation as nearly. We've struggled with this for years. And one of the biggest things for the rebuild was like why we changed the gates, why we changed other elements of gameplay, because they don't work very well in an RTS game. They were good ideas on paper, but they presented too many technical challenges and too much, like, I guess you can say, issues of the Unreal Engine in terms of its navigation mesh. Where we're like, okay, we need to work with what we can. And basically, I guess you could say, optimize and just make sure everything's working correctly. So this is one of the changes that we made. We added a small helipad. That's about 2 or 3K, I believe, off the top of my head. And you can only build the pilot, the scout drone, and the little bird. And it was a gateway drug or an entry to like early air power. And then we added the large one, which builds all of them, but also it builds the Blackhawk, the Sharon, the Apache, and the Shawnee. Yeah. So then that way you get the best of 2 worlds. So if you're early game, you want to resupply your little bird, you want to get some quick little guns on them, you can. If you're in the mid to late game, you'd start building the heavier, bigger helipad. And then that way it's smaller, it's more compact, it's in a more like ideal shape. Because the circle just wasn't cutting it. You have no idea how often I talk to people, the negative reviews, the Steam, the Discord, and they'd be like, this circle, where the fuck do I fit it? It's like, it's an odd shape. It doesn't make sense. Like, I can't, it's so large. So that was one of the things that we wanted to also rectify this time around with the rebuild, taking into consideration people's feedback over the years, was designing a more simplistic, like, helipad. It just works. You know, you can walk on it. It'll facilitate civilian evacuation in the future, the larger one for the Chinook. And that way, we're checking all the boxes later down the line for just when we add that functionality. So that's another little, like, tidbit of things that we just kind of snuck in there. And just kind of, it wasn't really publicized too much, but I love it. It works great. I would never go back to the previous helipad because you figure, like, this one just works so much more seamlessly. and it you can put these anywhere practically based off of two sizes. Excuse me. One of the other thing was, let me see if I can open this up. This is a new system that's in, and I'm kind of curious for feedback. I'm just going to quickly review this. Is that there is a there is a bullet penetration system. Every time you see the purple text is because a bullet basically went through and hit someone else. So we got a lot of feedback of the gameplay balance over the last 2 weeks. And this is one of the things that we did that was in Legacy that we ported back up again. And the idea was that bullets based off of their caliber would have a higher chance to pen. And they would have a bullet mitigation per hit. And they would have a max penetration amount. And that way guns like the LMG or the M107 would penetrate multiple enemies. So the operator can do this. The RTS units can do this. And they do it passively. So then that way it made controlling large groups of infected a little more manageable, because you'd get some bullets that would just go through and hit 3 people based off of the caliber of the bullet. And Michael is still going through and working through the backlog of optimizing that and just kind of figuring out what makes sense for balance stake. And then he's also going through and fixing the weapon sounds. Because some of the weapon sounds, when we pour them over from Legacy, you could hear them from everywhere. Or they're really quiet. Or they're really loud. So he's kind of going through and working through that backlog as we speak. And basically just trying to like optimize the sounds and make sure everything is working correctly. So keep in mind, we're as of the patch a day ago, a majority of those have been solved. There's still some situations where he's just testing still and making sure everything sounds right and the guns sound meaty and they're not too loud but they're not too quiet. So you don't open the game and you're like, what the fuck? Your eardrums get blown out. So that's another thing that we're conscious of and we're tweaking going into next week. Hopefully you guys have tried out the electrified fences and the barbed wire. That hasn't really been publicized too much in terms of basically like the barbed wire and the electrified fences now do damage when you hit them. So try them out. Let me know what you think. In terms of, are they too powerful? Are they too weak? Because that was a big thing of incentivization and Legacy to force people or want people to get tier 3 fences, because then that way it would literally, they'd hit you melee only, and then they'd get a force feedback that would hit them back. So then that way, same thing for the barbed wire. So both tiers of barbed wire do it, and so does the tier 3 wall. So you want to kind of get to the tier 3 wall when you can actually afford it, because it would electrify. And we'll talk about, we might put a stun in, but that might be too broken. Right now, it's applying a dot of stun, but it's not stunning them per se. And then the barbed wire is applying a dot of bleed, and then they bleed out. So those are different things that we kind of put in there on the back end. We do need to visually show the dots a little bit better, because when you get hit by a spitter, there's no way of really telling how long that dot lasts. That's something else that I need to kind of squeeze in there as a quality of life change to make it a little bit more intuitive. I've talked to Hawkins and a couple other people about that on the public Discord. Like, if this guy gets spit, now it's 2.5 seconds. Before it was 7.5. And it was a death sentence a month ago. Now it's a lot more manageable. But like, what we want to do is little bars here, like in Empire War, Star Wars, where it's like where they had the good against, bad against. We would have like dynamic little red and green boxes that would appear along here, and if you highlight them, it would show you what dots are active and how long they have, similar to the ability system. That is something that I'll show you guys the mock-up, and then we're gonna move on. Let me find that. Let me open that too, just so you guys can see. Those are tidbits that are in progress. I have to kind of get with Winter on a couple of these things. He's like on a work trip right now. He helps do the UI as a volunteer occasionally. Let me find, hold on. Bear with me. Here we are. So we were visualizing something like this. So let me copy this over. If it would be nice and open for me, please. Oh, wrong writer. Something like that is what we were visualizing and thinking about. Is some way to visualize the dots, because there's going to be dots in the game. There's always going to be things that are active on your units, whether they be positive or negative. So like if you're in a medical tent and you're being healed, you're receiving ML. You're receiving an XP boost. You're bleeding. You're infected. Anything that gives you a quick tidbit of information. And we were looking at Empire War, and we were looking at their good against, bad against boxes, and we were like Star Wars rather, and we were just like, that's not a bad idea. We could maybe prototype something like that and play around with it. So this is something that we're going to try and fit in over the next month or so. We'll find some time and just kind of get that cemented. So then that way you have more actionable intel of what's affecting your units and what you need to do in some situations, besides just looking at their health bar and seeing their health is going down. Then you have to guess, oh, he must have gotten hit by a spitter. I need to get him to a medic, which is kind of shitty. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up for that aspect. So let me go ahead and move it into the Q&A. Oh, and just so you guys can see it, I guess I'll just show this really quickly. I guess start dropping your questions in Steam chat on YouTube and on Discord. I'm gonna start answering them. If you haven't addressed them yet, like if you put the question in previously, put it in again, because I wasn't looking, and then I'll go through and ask them, or rather answer them. These are some of the mock-ups where basically we're going through, kind of processing through as like designs for the custom game options going into next week. And that's the biggest thing, is making sure we have the difficulty modes for the game that's for people that the game is too hard as it stands right now, which is basically just preset options for the preset system. And then we're going to be expanding this area. So this is the mock-up that Winter did, because he doesn't have the full list of all the stuff we're doing. He just delivers the UI in terms of like the toggles and what it visually needs to look like. And then we're going to implement it in terms of like what you can change. Give you a couple of ideas. We're going to just do flat damage multipliers. Health. Can they walk? Can they run? Do they appear? What days do they appear on? Basically enough till you get a little bit of microcosm and mini modding. So if you want to increase the standard infected's health and make it to where they can only walk, you can do that. And that's one of the biggest things that we're going to be doing going into around Wednesday, Thursday. Crossing my fingers if there's no crazy bugs. So we're going to move into the Q&A part. Let me go ahead and bring up the YouTubes, and then we're going to basically just kind of jump into the questions. So if you guys have questions, feel free to drop them into the channel. Let me switch the feed over to the Q&A section. All right, so what questions do we have? Anyone? Let's see.
Whoa, one at a time, guys.
Silent observers is what I say. Maybe they're just waiting for the playtest. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hi, Rift.
Oh, hi, Rift.
How are you doing?
How you doing?
Oh, Bronx is
what did you have?
Question. And then YouTube chat, feel free to drop your question in, and I'll answer it to the best of my ability. We're going to try and conclude the stream in the next 10 minutes. So then that way we can get on to the build. I'm actually, since it's so quiet right now, that's exactly what I was going to do, Preef. I was going to cook the next build. So then that way, the lag time's lower. Literally. All right, Creek, fill the air.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
With what? You've gone for everything. Oh yeah, I'm gonna do a poll in the chat if y'all want to see Robert wear that what Rift has posted. That CERC apron will make it happen. If I have to pin him down and put the apron on him, I will do it.
I'm not doing that. I want me to wear. No,
it's promotional. What are you doing?
I'm not wearing that shirt when I cook builds. Okay. Well, let's see. Okay. Well, I guess there's no questions.
Well,
all right. So what we're gonna do
questions.
is that you figure that's pretty much. Well, question. Hold on. So
Bronze is still typing as well.
Lunatic asked on YouTube, right? This might be a tad out of pocket, but what's up with the Fenrir blokes I've been hearing about? Like, I get their mercs in the vein of Black Tusk from the Division of Blackwatch from Prototype, but what are they about? Like, what are their goals? And if that's something you can talk about. So, as it stands right now, the Fenrir group They're supposed to be long term in terms of being a group that hunts Chelsea and is equally against the CERC as the third faction. We want to get to a point in terms of the game where we can take hands off on the CERC and we can focus on the infected as a playable group, and then the Fenrir as a third playable group. Kind of following the archetype of StarCraft 2, where the CERC is more of the Terrans, the infected are the Zerg, and Fenrir is more of the Protoss, where they have more experimental weaponry and they're more unconventional in terms of basically more hybridization for their units. As it stands right now, Fenrir is more of a long-term goal. At this point, I would say 2026 to 2027. We don't see the game as like a one and done. We see it as like a progression or an evolution, like similar to Stellaris. So that's something that we want to aim for in the foreseeable future when things calm down, the rebuild is over, and after the campaign. Because you figure we still have. What are you gonna say?
I'm not gonna lie. I was gonna say they remind me a lot more like the Brotherhood of Nod. In this like junta faction.
We haven't shown that much of them. Like all the content we have is kind of hidden in our channel. So you figure like they're more so they're supposed to be more of like the experimental like weaponry on the side of like having like more not improvised but more of like they're a well-funded PMC organization where they have like experimental like version of an Abrams, or they have like a railgun, or like different things like that make them a little bit more like hybridization where they can do more with less, like the Protoss per se, and they have a little more and they have like more cloaking units and more of like subterfuge of getting around because they have less people to work with because they're get in and get out, they're covert. So I guess you could say they're more like the GLA in a way, where they're more of like they basically run like covert operations. They're in and out, they don't actually stay in one area for too long, they don't have a permanent base. The whole idea of them is they're constantly moving, and they don't have like a preset location like every other faction. Because we wanted to go in that direction long term, where every faction basically has their thing. Where CERC is over efficiency, not over efficiency, but I guess everything's spread out. Everything has like, there's a unit for every role, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But there's not much redundancy. Fenrir is the opposite of them, but there's hybridization and there's more of like shared rolled units where you have a assault that is good for healing, but also could do some minor, like sniping. But like that kind of stuff where it's like you have like units that can do multiple roles and multiple platforms, and they're more interchangeable inside situations. But anyhow, it's one of those things where Fenrir is more of a long-term thing, and it's something that we're looking at, as we keep developing, as we kind of get out of this whole spiel of the rebuild, and just to kind of get to the point of what I envision where the game is done, per se. So let's see, there's a question on YouTube. Yeah.
Bronze has a question. Will one of the new maps be a mostly empty test map so we can test things without dealing with infected? There are a few times where I take screenshots and not notes of bugs, but then later find them to be insufficient. So having a lightweight test map to reproduce them on would be nice. I mean, realistically, we're getting rid of the co-op test map. I'm sure that could be.
Well, you make like a dev map.
Retrofitted. Yeah, like retrofit it into a test.
Like spawn infected, and just kind of like test mechanics and balance and damage, and just see how the game is playing. That's not a bad idea. I kind of like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
That's good. Actually,
write that down on my whiteboard.
Testing range.
And I'm gonna talk to Efren about that on Monday. To see if that we can look into adding a map in the rotation on one of the categories, or just add a new button on the main menu that just says test arena or test map. That way you can click on a button and it spawns infected. You click on another button, it spawns CERC. And that way it'd be like a quick way for people to just kind of test the game and just tell us what they like and what they don't like in a rapid fire motion. So if you want to try and break the game, you can. Or if you just want to see how weapons handle at different ranges in RTS without having to jump into a map, and we have like range odometers or whatever, like range markers, so that way people know like 500, 600, 800 meters and the damage mitigation that goes into them. So you can tell Michael from a balance standpoint, this is kind of weird. I don't like this. So let me see. That is basically how they're supposed to work, Lunatic. What you're essentially saying in that comment is exactly how we want them to play. But they're more like Blackwatch. They're there to study they're there to collect samples. Their currency is based off of DNA instead of cash because they're sending them back to their benefactor. And it's the biggest thing is they're just there and deployed there to basically just study the infection and kill anyone that gets in their way, and eventually to capture or kill Chelsea. So that's the biggest thing. I mean, in the book, they're the ones that shoot down the Black Hawk that's transporting Chelsea. So they want it to spread into San Francisco. They're the shadowy organization at the end of the book that's setting up that missile launcher, and they shoot it over the bay, and then that causes it to crash land because they knew Chelsea was going to evolve into a second stage because they were involved loosely with the development of that virus and the lore. So they work with people that basically the Americans stole the virus from in the book. So you figure it's one of those things where it's like it kind of is all going to kind of coalesce, I guess you could say, come together as we just kind of keep, building it and kind of getting it back to where it was. We'll be able to deliver on those elements because I can't wait to get to the point where around December, because the next 30 to 60 days are fucking critical. The next 60 to 60 days are going to basically bring the last major facets of gameplay back up to what they were in Legacy. With some bleed over, I'm sure. That's always going to happen with bugs and whatnot. But then at that point, going into 2026, we'll be able to put this behind us and be able to start the year fresh with a newer perspective of like, okay, even if there is some bleed over for dynamic civilian groups or civilian evacuation, we'll bang those out. And then all of our effort's going to be at that point, no new maps, and we're working on the campaign because we need to get we need a full year to work on the campaign and flesh that out and get everything situated. So that's at this point our goal is to get to the point where we can work on the campaign next year and be able to leave early access, because you figure I wanted to leave early access this year. That shit did not happen. I thought the rebuild would take 6 months. It took 10 months. And we're not done yet.
Overcome Fear asked if there's any plans for more naval vessels. As of now, we have assets for the Coast Guard, but they could be given as rewards for clearing infected areas.
I'll say this again, is that basically one of the biggest things is the LHA-6 and the LCAC were incubators for the aquatic combat that I want to do long term. It's the same reason why the LHA-6 has a loading dock for jets now. Is I don't have an answer on that yet. Let's see what kind of improvements we make. Because I wasn't really like the prototype version and the legacy version of the LHA-6 and the LCACs were okay, but they had a lot of issues with. I guess the LHA-6. No, sorry, the LCAC had a lot of issues going from water to land. But I guess when it comes to the aquatic combat, I think the LHA-6 was pretty damn good before we stopped the rebuild. Sorry, stop the legacy version. So let me think about that, because it's something that I've talked about in the past with some people on the team, is getting the Coast Guard cutters or something so you have missile ships or whatever. But there would have to be an evolution. It'd have to be like, we give CERC that, the infected get infected sperm whales. The Leviathan will go out and say hi to your boat. So it's that kind of thing where there has to be a natural evolution. I can't just give to one side. Because once I give the CERC, the airstrikes, and the ground vehicles, they're going to get, the infected are going to get their asses handed to them until we add the birds, the Leviathan, and maybe some minor tweaks to the Juggernaut to make them more efficient. So it's like it's going to be a give and take where it's like I got to do one side then do the other, and that's why this month is going to be chaotic, because you figure the Juggernaut's in a pretty good place. I think there's some instances where he kind of gets confused, and we'll find those down and eradicate them as we go across them. But it's one of those things where like I want to get the rest of the ground vehicles in this month, and then get the doctrines, and then focus on what needs to happen to the infected to bring them back up to the level they need to be at to fight the CERC. And then at that point, it's the LHA-6 and the LCAC. And if we can, maybe I'll squeeze in some, but probably not. That might be something later down the line is like a content pack for free or whatever, where we're just like, I'm very conscious about adding new shit. Because new shit means that new bugs, more things to do from a programming standpoint. Level design, not so much. Level design is just pathfinding, some navigation oddities here and there, but it doesn't really affect things in the grand scheme of things. It's just, but like when you add new mechanics and systems like that, I'm like, that's a really good idea. It's on my wish list, but it's something I want to look into later down the line. What else do we have for questions? Let's see. Okay, so Lunatic, what about giving CERC exosuit and skeleton troops like they have in Stalker? So maybe I'll get some shit for this, but I hate exosuits in modern military games. I might give it to like maybe a Fenrir guy. Is like because they're more of the. I'm trying to have a clear separation of we give Fenrir some high tech stuff like experimental weapons like what was that fucking gun? It's supposed to replace the M4. Help me out, Krieg.
What was it? The bullpup
No, hold
like
on.
farmhouse gun?
The XM8, like that kind of stuff, or XM7, where it's like that kind of stuff, where it's like I want to give them. I'm saving the experimental crazy shit for Fenrir later down the line. So there are guns that are pre-designated for dynamic civilian groups. There are guns that are pre-designated for CERC and so on and so forth. So that way, there's not too much class pollination, and every class or group plays distinctly different. When it comes to what you're talking about. Let me put a note in that one because you figure realistically, I want to make the defining characteristics of the operators be in their abilities and not in their appearance. So then that way, it's like we can give them abilities where they can like I don't know have a repel gun or some way of like traversing buildings, or or we can give them the ability to call in airstrikes via a laser designator when you're playing as the operator. Because once we put in the doctrines, the next logical step is making it to where operators can call in airstrikes without the intervention of an RTS player. So they can laser target, and then a Warthog will come by. Or they can drop a Moab. Or, any other thing you can do. So that's the way that I see it in terms of that progression. But, like, exosuits, kind of out of my purview, at least for right now, unless it's Fenrir. I might change my opinion in terms of like a cosmetic skin for fun, but it has to make sense because I'm not trying to turn the operators into fucking Call of Duty with having Kim Kardashian or whoever the fuck they are in that game they have nowadays running around. What was that girl? I forget the singer, whatever her name is. Her running around. I don't like that shit. No,
Ariana Grande,
Cardi B. I don't. Nicki Minaj. Whoever
Nicki
the fuck
Minaj.
it is, I hate that shit. Ninja Turtles was funny. I'll give it to them. Ninja Turtles and fucking Shredder was great. But yeah, no, I wouldn't put that in my game.
Nelly Furtado DLC one.
I'll listen to them after this stream just because you said that.
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
Sabrina Carpenter.
She is bae.
They make good music.
Let's protect her. Okay, so let's see. What do we have for questions? Here's another question. Carrie Miller asked, is there a possibility to control the friendly units in your group and set up a construction site directly through TPS mode instead of transfer to RTS mode first? So you're basically saying you want to be able to command units and operator to be able to do that, right? So that way you can have like more skin in the game of like, you don't feel like you have to, because as the operator right now, you can only build and repair what's already there. So you're reliant on an RTS player to put down a hologram. And then you have to build it or repair it in that moment. What you're talking about is something I want to do long term. That's going to be in that 2-week period I mentioned earlier. Hell or high water, I'm going to spend 2 weeks after we finish doctrines, right before we finish civilian evacuation, before we start civilian evacuation. I'm going to spend 2 weeks on the operators, adding in their ability to drive vehicles. We're going to add in the ability for them to do the airstrikes. We'll do the building if we can fit it in that time frame. That might be pushed off a little bit longer because me and Derek have talked about that. That's why some of the CERC buildings have interiors. That's why some of the CERC buildings have access panels. Is that we want to make it to where you're not reliant on an RTS player and you can play it as confidently in one as you play at the other, so where you're not at a disability, like being able to open and close gates, being able to change their lock status. Those are all things that we're looking at when we've earmarked after doctrines. To that point, we need to focus that 1 to 2 weeks are just small little quality of life changes and just catching up on all the stuff we put in for RTS, like the airstrikes and any new abilities that like the other classes got.
we can basically implement them for the operators and get them up to par. So yeah, that is something I'm looking at, and I'm very confident. I'm very perceptive of the issues with the operators. Now, we added in the skid shooting, that was great. We added in the ability to operators to ride in the vehicles, and that's going to carry over to the ground vehicles. So when we put the ground vehicles in, you'll be able to get in seats. And one thing I have to put in there, either myself or Derek, is we need to put the ability to switch seats, so you can switch from a shooter position to a not shooter position if you don't want to get hit by a spitter, because the exposed positions and everything else. So it's one of those things where like that's part of that 2 week span of time. Because on paper, the helicopter is flyable by an operator. We just didn't want to open that fucking can of worms right now. We have enough stuff going on with people claiming that we're not an RTS game because we put the operator in. So we were just like, okay, we're going to come back to this in a couple of weeks, maybe a month or so, and we're going to basically add some more polish to the operator, because there's an entire control system set up for the helicopters. We just need to test it to see how it feels, because we programmed the helicopters in terms of like inputs of like going up, going down, going left. It's not some weird hacky transform bullshit. It's like there's actually, when the AI is flying the helicopter, they're flying it as if a real person was flying it. They're putting inputs in different directions, and then the physics system is interpreting what that means in the confines of controlling that vehicle. So it's the same thing for everything else that's going to precede it. It's going to be a layered rollout to just kind of get the game to a point where we're happy and everyone else is happy in terms of basically the gameplay. Let's see what we have for Discord. Let me catch up. What is that? Oh, fuck.
I've got a few.
Mushrooms. Hold on. Elephant artillery for the infected would be awesome. It would also be a counterpart to CERC striker motor carrier. That is something that I am still mulling overcome, FR. That's something that I need to come to a decision to by this month in terms of what I want to do for the infected to counteract artillery. One thing was obviously the birds and the Leviathan, but they need a counter. They need something to counter it. Is the only problem. And the only thing is I get pushback because people have in their mind what zombies are in terms of basically like they're this, they're that. It's very loose in terms of everyone's interpretation of zombies. So when I put some archetypes of units in that are similar to Left 4 Dead or this game or that game or Space Marine 2, whatever, I get pushback because sometimes they're like, well, I don't want the infected to be able to artillery me. I don't want them to be a counter to CERC in those regards. But it's like there's still balance to consider. So I have to, if I do that vector, I had to at least add it into the custom game options for people that don't want to interact with those systems. But in my mind, there has to be, like what Krieg posted, like from the bugs from what is that? Starship Troopers. Is like there has to be a counterplay. Yep. It can't just be atypical standard infected on the map, because it's going to be easy. You're going to just mow through everyone unless you turn up their health and you do all this other crazy shit. You're going to run them over. You know what I mean? So you figure it's one of those things where I'm looking at that and I'm like, we'll add it into the custom game options. If people want to turn it off, great. But that's not how I'm going to play the game. I'm going to play it with all the counters and all the AI and just struggle bust it out, because I want them to kick my ass when it comes down to it. And I want to basically have that give and take of like the spitters and the blow up guys and, the juggernauts and the leviathans and the birds and the fucking hunters and everything else. That basically makes that perfect triage of like they bring them in as they're needed. But I understand that's not for everyone. So that's why, like, as I say these things, just keep in mind the asterisk of custom game options. Let me scroll around. That's a cool screenshot, Riff. Steel. All right. So I guess I'll share this on the stream. I guess someone shared a, I don't want to share that t-shirt. God damn it. This is what Riff took basically playing on the map. I guess doing drive-bys on the Little Bird while he's playing co-op with his friends. I guess they were strafing this area because infected were coming in and he's playing as the operator. I guess just mowing them down with the MGL. So, good game. Anyway, back to Q&A. So let's see. Okay, so that's caught up. Let me see if there's any other questions on YouTube, and then we're going to start to wrap this up so I can work on getting that build out. So drones are. I don't have an answer on that yet. I can't confirm or deny about drones. It's just one of those things where I want to put it in. It just comes down to I don't want to stretch myself too thin. Ideally, I'd put them in the doctrines path because the engineer was supposed to be the drone guy. He was supposed to be the demolitions and like repair guy. Like his job was just to get in there and fuck shit up, build temporary emplacements via the throwaway turret. Like those throwaway turrets will come back when we get the doctrines. The ones that were in the people would make the Margaret lines with in World War One. Those will come back as pets for the engineer. That are just deployable pet turrets or whatever. And then the other thing would be is basically like what you're talking about, being able to have like drones or pets, like in Command 0 Hour, where you had those little like mechanical drones that would follow you around. Yeah. That is something that I want to look into. It's just, if I could fit it in, I'll fit it in doctrines. If we burn too much time, because I have to keep a time gate in terms of how much we put in each area to try and hit our deadlines, make sure there's enough time for bugs, then it might be pushed off later on as like post 2025 content. But it's a really good idea. I like that idea. It's something that I'm constantly thinking of. There is a male commander, Pam. There's like 6 now for the operators. So I don't know when you played it last, but it's a cockfest for the rebuild for the operator. We're talking about the operator. There's like 80 to 90% males now. We actually need to add some more girl operators in the future, because you can also play as the generic. If you switch your operator generic, and then you can shoot. Well, yeah, there's more men now. Like here, I'll show it really quickly for the guy that asked the question, and then we're gonna move on. So let me just share my screen. We're gonna load up main menu, and I'm just gonna really quickly show you what I'm talking about. So if you go here, for the rebuild, spawn in. I didn't mean to do that. Operator customization. It's loading shaders. And then you go to here. You can actually switch and use the normal characters now as your appearances for the operator. And then you have Alan Walker. It's shader compiling. I don't ever play as Alan inside the editor, so it's going to freeze for a microsecond because it's asynchronously loading the textures. And then you can play as Hanzo, Michael's personal favorite.
Yeah, there's different variants for Hanzo.
I call it Hanzo bias.
My favorite.
I don't ever play as these characters, so it's shader compiling in real time.
The what? Yeah.
See? There's another one he's working on. He had some skinning issues, so he took it out temporarily. There's technically a couple more operators he needs to kind of get to, but it's been a low priority. But we're going to flood this with more cosmetics and more visuals. If you guys get, our goal is to at least give you guys like 15 to 20 versions of different like outfits, different characters. You know, with generic, we're not really counting those. Those are just like, well, if we could put it in there, fuck it. Like, you know, I mean, we just go to the sniper and then just explore Alcatraz, and, you know, you can play as a sniper, so we'll just put it in there. Who cares? Like, it's already in the game. We're not going to itemize that and be like, we're not going to put any more in. So one of the biggest things is like, well, we still have to get up to that 15 count alongside the standard infected and all the other stuff. But that's another initiative. We're slowly but surely turning out that number, increasing the amount of sub outfits, because we want to give people enough tools or enough ways to cosmetically customize themselves. So we want to get like some more NATO people in there, like the Germans and like the Polish and like the British, just maybe some Mexico special opera. We want to just kind of like diversify a little bit and just kind of get a bunch of different aesthetics and visuals in there of real world organizations that are allied with the US military. So we can just basically like show them as like, I guess you could say they're on loan and they're essentially just kind of like, so they're kind of like advising and just kind of getting a praise of the situation from an outside looking in for their country. They're sending them in as like emissaries to be like, okay, like we're here for an advisory role, but really we're here to kill shit. So that's kind of how we're working the operators to be able to kind of have like different cosmetics in the future long term for like different nations that are allies with us, obviously. So you figure that's one of the things that we're doing there. Let me just shut down the build there, and then we're going to switch over to Q&A. So let's see. Anything else? Generic operators holding customized grips will get weird animation. So if you notice any weird animations, take a screenshot. Tag Michael Carey. Like that's his bread and butter. If you notice a weird angle, a weird variation, RTS operator, whatever, just throw it out there in the escalation rebuild section on Discord preferably, and tag Michelle, and he will reply back to you and fix it. Typically, if in a day, maybe a couple of days. If he has a huge backlog or he's working his day job, it might be a couple of days, but we'll do our best to accommodate that. What the fuck? You guys did a poll. I am not doing that. If that poll wins, I am not doing that. Look. Look at
Yeah,
these trolls.
yeah, people have spoken. People have spoken.
I'm not wearing. That's like trying to get me to wear a fucking Hello Kitty outfit every time I fucking cook a build.
There'll be an Amazon guy at your door every day.
They torture me.
You'll wear it one day.
This is horrible. They're trying to get me to wear a fucking apron every time I cook the build. Anyway, God help me. So, let's see what we have. Any more questions before we wrap this up? No, I'm not doing a poll for Hello Kitty. You guys are horrible. So melee weapons are going to be added back in. That's going to be around the doctrines thing. That's why I'm saying is that's going to be after the ground vehicles. Is the melee weapons are going to be the riot shields. The riot shields were primarily put in to block spitter projectiles, so you can put units behind them and they'd shoot past them. That's going to be sometime around the end of the month. This month, yeah. That's going to be the end of this month. We need a solid 2 weeks to get the vehicles in a place where we're happy. And then basically 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks, 3 to 5 days to get the Ajax in. Another week to work with the community to find issues and put them to fucking bed for their pathfinding. And then we start porting over the other vehicles. And then once the vehicles are in, the Abrams is in, everyone's happy. Then we're going to move on to doctrines, get the airstrikes, get the upgrades, get the passives in, and make sure it all works for co-op. And to do what you're saying, Preeve, as well, where it's like the formations did not fundamentally understand the value of having a riot shield man, so they wouldn't try and keep the riot shields in the front. So that's something that Derek's going to have to edit on the formation system when we get to there, which is not that bad, probably like an hour or 2 or 2 weeks, to make it to where if you give a formation move order and there are units that have riot shields, it will always keep them in the front, regardless of like their stats or their class. Specifically, we had the assault heavy shield. We had the assault light, and then we had the heavy, and then we had the heavy have a heavy shield or whatever. And those will be coming back. We might just give them both to the assault because it didn't really make that much sense to have a heavy have a shield. It was more so we were just kind of, I guess you could say, experimenting with that. But it probably makes more sense to have the cannon fodder assault have that and have the heavy focus on the heavy guns instead of having that. So we'll get back to him on that one, and we'll tweak and just kind of adjust accordingly. Let me see. Is there anything else for questions before we wrap this up? No manatees or tomahawks? What does that mean? Oh, you're talking about melee weapons. Let me get back to you on that one. Technically, putting in the riot shields and making the CERC support it means that civilians would also support having melee weapons. So technically, you're right. The fundamentals, the basis. Let's wait. Let's put a pin in that. Let's come back to that when we do some dynamic civilian groups. Because you figure that's something that we can look into for them. Where we do the riot shield as like an evolution of putting the melee weapons back in. We make the formation system understand that system. And then we can basically take it a leapfrog effect. Where when we get this dynamic civilian group, so you have civilians running around, some of them could just roll around with melee weapons sometimes. Because they can't find guns. So let's put that off for right now. Let's put a pin in that, and we'll return to that when we can in a couple months. Okay, whoever posted that, you're out of pocket for that fucking Hello Kitty one. Oh, I don't even know what that is. I'm not wearing that. You can wear it. You can wear it on stream.
Yeah, sure. And I win the game on the hardest difficulty.
You stream that. You play it on the hardest difficulty, and you don't play Momo's Art where you're building a base in the back in a month. And yeah, I'll watch. I'll dig it.
Oh, can I listen to?
You have to listen to
Vivaldi,
Katy Perry, or Sabrina Carpenter. You have to listen to girly music the entire time you play.
I don't know if you like see my Spotify. That's all
Oh,
I
you do?
listen to anyway. Between that and Ace, like metal, yeah,
Damn, I was trying to torture
pretty
him, but I
much.
can never torture this fuck. He listens to all the same music. Well, that sucks. I cry myself to sleep anytime. Oh yeah, no. If you see my Spotify, it is like the most like fucking out of pocket music all day long on my Discord. Like, I just listen to fucking yeah. Anyway, all right. So we're gonna conclude there. I'm gonna switch over to getting the playtest going. So again, we're gonna be having a public playtest on the Discord in about 10 minutes. I just need about 10 minutes to just cook a couple of things, get the build out. Anyone is welcome to come. You bought the game on Steam, great. On YouTube, on Discord, the more the merrier, 16-player count limit. So we're going to be playing the game on Treasure Island, having a good time. I'm sure we're going to find bugs and whatever. I'll probably be recording on my Twitch, so that way I can get a new video up, so don't be too crazy. Again, I want to thank everyone for coming to today's podcast and just see what's going on, what we're working on. Again, thank you for everyone's patience as we kind of get through this rebuild and slowly but surely get back to the point of where it was a legacy, but better. If you want to consider supporting the team, check out the support packs on Steam. Check out the merch store. Check out our Discord pledge system or our Patreon. They all help. We work on day jobs as we're working on the game. So sometimes we go a little bit slower, sometimes we go a little bit faster. It just depends on our schedule for whatever we're assigned that week or month. So everything helps. And slowly but surely, we're getting it back to the point where we're happy and proud of what we've built. And you guys are getting the product that you deserve and that we're going to deliver for you guys. I think by the end of this year, I would wager. So that's it. And I'm going to be in playtest 1, and let's get a group going.